Okay. Okay, everybody. Final presenter for session 2, and then we're off to lunch. Please welcome Ana Sofia Perez.
Hello everyone, my name is Ana Sofia Perez, and today I will be presenting my AP research presentation. And I would like to start with why. Why did I choose how does exposure to idealized social media images affect self-perception and the desire to continue viewing similar content? As a social media user, it does not amaze me that the average person spends about 2 hours and 24 minutes on social media every single day, according to Howarth 2025. What does surprise me is the fact that I am unable to stop, even when the media becomes boring, and the constant comparison leaves me feeling off, feeling sad. Frequent users of social media are more likely to chase unrealistic beauty standards, and sadly this can only lead to anxiety, body dissatisfaction. Social media is not only changing our daily habits, but also changing how we view beauty and harming our perceptions of how we actually look. So this brings me to my next slide. What exactly is idealized, and why does it affect our self-perception and feeds our desire to keep scrolling? According to Oxford Languages, idealized refers to being regarded or represented as perfect or as better than in reality. This makes social media users admire and aim towards looking like specific, constructed, and often unrealistic standards. Some examples could be the Instagram face, the golden ratio of beauty, and luxury and success-based lifestyles. Rafael Lucas et al. 2024 analyzed 100 of the top female influencers using a biomedical image analysis software to measure certain proportions of their faces. Results showed that an ideal Instagram face is a close ideal to the golden ratio, which is formed by features like full lips, high cheekbones, small noses, and a strong jawline. When real people try to achieve this ideal standards of beauty, it often leads them to have cosmetic surgery or at least consider it. The constructed golden ratio has become almost a blueprint for surgeries and an unreachable kind of beauty which is affecting more than just teenagers. Here you have some examples of people that are close to the golden standard. I remember being a little girl Googling who the most beautiful girl in the world was, and how sad I felt after comparing myself to the most random girl and feeling like I couldn't look less like me. On social media, I don't even have to Google it. Nowadays, it is everywhere. This topic is important because it is becoming an addiction. It's no longer just viewing. It is constant judging, comparing, and copying. And understanding how our brain works is key to understanding why people feel the need to compare themselves to the standards they see on social media. Understanding the neurological basis of social media helps explain why users constantly compare themselves to online beauty standards. The human stratum, a part of the brain that processes responses to material rewards like food or money, is also activated when people receive positive social feedback. This means that interactions such as likes, comments, and even self-comparison can trigger small, often unconscious reward responses. As a result, individuals are not always aware that their brains are being rewarded while engaging in comparison behaviors. More studies found that social comparison activates these same reward processing regions, encouraging repeated behavior. This creates a cycle in which users compare themselves, experience brief validation, and continue seeking it, even when it reinforces dissatisfaction and unattainable ideals over time. Social media platforms intensify this cycle through algorithmic design. Research also explained that apps like Instagram and TikTok turn validation into visible rewards, such as likes, followers, which shape behavior and self-perception. These systems are linked to increased anxiety, sleep disruption, and low self-esteem among teenagers. Additionally, studies show that repeated exposure to similar appearances creates a facial homogeneity effect, influencing what we see as attractive. Digital tools and trends further reinforce these standards. Researchers describe how beauty trends spread rapidly before being recognized as unrealistic, often leaving users feeling insufficient. Although platforms may reveal the artificial nature of these standards, studies found that curated content continues to present perfection as effortless, reinforcing narrow and often unattainable definitions of beauty. There's a lot of research done on how social media shapes and reinforces beauty standards, but gaps still remain. Past studies have mostly focused on the experiences of teenage girls and the damaging psychological effects of being exposed to idealized beauty content online. Some example of these studies could be Henriques and Patnick, 2020, and Papajou, Fisher, and Cross, 2022. However, most studies have only looked at the negative effects, frequently using only vulnerable subjects like teenage girls. Most of the sources we see online overlook the scrolling reward cycle. Why does it feel so good to keep scrolling, even if it affects our mood and self-perception? Filling in this gap could help us gain a more thorough understanding of why social media harms us, yet still rewards us enough to maintain loyal users. It is deeper than just an algorithm that keeps us coming back. What exactly is feeding this addiction? To be able to understand participants' feelings and thoughts, I utilized a mixed methods approach, using an experiment as well as follow-up interviews. Instead of focusing on negative effects of comparison and idealized beauty content, I chose to answer the question, how does exposure to idealized social media images affect self-perception and the desire to continue viewing similar contents? Do teenagers notice this brief rewarding moment, or are they unaware of it? My method observed real-time measurements of changes in emotion while participants view idealized content. About 300 students received an initial interest survey. Of the 61 students who responded, 45 showed interest in participating, either because they were 18 or willing to get parental consent. Emails were sent out to these participants asking them to fill out a digital consent form, but only a very small number of participants responded. A gift card was then added as an incentive to try and boost participation, which resulted in a very small increase in received consent forms. Therefore, I shifted my studies to focus from quantity to the actual quality of the data. I added the interview to gather more detailed data and to try to obtain a better understanding of teens' experiences with social media use, self-perception, and their scrolling habits. In the end, less than 20 students completed the consent form. Participants completed a scroll or stop experiment on a computer screen where they saw the idealized feed alongside questions about their mood, self-perception, and desire to keep scrolling. These things were measured 6 times, once before starting, after every 5 posts, and at the end, all in around 7 minutes. Participants would rate their current mood and personal satisfaction using a scale from 1 to 5. A rating of 1 meant low mood satisfaction and low personal satisfaction, while a rating of 5 meant high mood and high personal satisfaction. They were told they could stop at any moment throughout the experiment, and were also reminded after every 5 posts, which helps track their reward-seeking behavior and real-time emotional changes. Here are the idealized feeds, some images that were in the actual feed. Here are some examples. Females were shown mostly perfect bodies, golden ratios, models from around the world. Males were shown ideal physiques, aesthetically pleasing routines, millionaire by age 20 kind of content, luxury cars, yachts, traveling around the world, symmetric faces, and healthy and loving relationships. It was complicated knowing what would trigger a feeling of comparison in a male student as a female. There is so much content directed to women, making us feel insecure or unsatisfied with who we are. After all, 84% of all influencers are female, according to Daria Velova, 2023. While for men, the content is different. There are more boxes to fill. There's the pressure to be rich, successful, fit, and loved. While for females, it is more universal, more based on looks and likes. Like in previous studies done, women are always shown idealized women. The interviews allowed participants to elaborate on their personal experience. They were asked to reflect on moments where they felt rewarded, their emotional states, and even moments that made them consider stopping their scrolling. Here are some examples of the actual questions on the interview. Across the interview and the scroll or stop experiment, patterns were found in participants' scrolling behaviors and psychological rewards. 6 main themes came up: anticipation, expectation, curiosity, comparison to others, emotional reactions, automatic versus conscious behavior, and perceived control over scrolling. These show multiple factors behind constant scrolling, even when participants were not fully enjoying the feed and know they could stop at any moment. Anticipation and expectation. Participants often kept scrolling because they anticipated possible rewards in upcoming images. This pattern also appeared in the scroll or stop experiment, where some participants continued scrolling even as their mood and personal satisfaction decreased. This suggests that the expectation of a reward can override dissatisfaction. Participants often remained curious about what would come next. Even when they were not immediately engaged with the post, participant 6 said, "Even if I didn't like the image I had just seen, I was still curious about the image that would show up next." This aligns with trials 4 and 6 of my experiment, where mood and personal dissatisfaction improved early on and then decreased later. This suggests that curiosity can sustain engagement despite declining self-satisfaction. Social comparison affected participants' scrolling in different ways. They compared themselves to the images, sometimes continuing and sometimes stopping. I saw this in trials 3, 8, and 9, where lower mood and personal satisfaction were linked to time spent viewing the idealized images, such as participant 9 stopping after 5 images. However, some participants also felt better through comparison or found the feed satisfying to scroll through. Scrolling behavior was influenced by emotional rewards like brief amusement or satisfaction. Participants were often driven by these short positive emotions even when their overall mood and personal satisfaction decreased. For example, trial 6 showed a brief increase in personal satisfaction before a decline, suggesting that small emotional incentives can maintain engagement. Automatic versus conscious behavior showed that scrolling was both intentional and automatic. In trials 9 and 8, participants sometimes chose to stop, but others often continued automatically. Even with low ratings, this suggests that scrolling is mainly automatic, but can still be consciously controlled. Throughout the experiment, participants' sense of control varies. Most people chose to keep scrolling despite being repeatedly asked, before, after every 5 posts, and at the end if they wanted to continue. Although 55% said that they would not have preferred to continue, they still did, suggesting that reduced perceived control. Results also showed that mood and personal satisfaction often declined or varied across trials, indicating different levels of control among participants. Overall, these findings suggest that social comparison, anticipated reward, curiosity, and emotional reward all influence continued scrolling. These trends highlight a complex relationship between motivation, emotional response, and self-regulation in social media use, where sporadic rewards often outweigh longer-term satisfaction. This study had several limitations that impacted its strength and replicability. The main limitation is the small sample size for both the experiment and follow-up interviews, which limits general conclusions and makes it harder to identify clear patterns, meaning results reflect more individual experiences. Participants were also limited due to consent requirements, especially for participants under 18, which reduced response rates and may have created a selection bias. The design of the social media feed is another limitation, as idealized content was not fully gender neutral, with males shown wealth and success-based lifestyle, and females shown appearance-based content, making comparisons less consistent. The short 7-minute duration also limits understanding of long-term scrolling behavior. Finally, self-reported data may introduce bias, as participants may not fully recognize or accurately report automatic behaviors, or may respond in socially desirable ways. Future research should use a larger and more diverse sample to improve reliability and allow clearer identification patterns. Studies should also standardize the type of idealized content shown, such as comparing lifestyle versus appearance-based feeds to better understand how different forms of idealization affect engagement and self-perception. Longer or repeated exposure studies are also recommended to examine how scrolling behavior changes over time and whether observed patterns persist or shift. Finally, using a mixed methods approach with a larger sample would strengthen findings by combining in-depth qualitative insights with more statistically reliable quantitative data. This study demonstrated the important role psychological rewards play in continuous social media scrolling. Participants' engagement was mainly influenced by anticipation or future rewards, even as mood and personal dissatisfaction declined. These factors often kept individuals scrolling, usually in ways that felt automatic to them. Most participants continued even when repeatedly asked if they wanted to stop, showing how short-term psychological rewards can outweigh conscious self-control. However, by the end of the experiment, over half said that they would not have liked to continue, suggesting that quick engagement does not lead to lasting satisfaction. The results also showed that the content type influenced emotional response and comparison. Differences in the feed, such as luxury and success-based content for males, shaped how participants compared themselves and experienced satisfaction, highlighting how content selection affects both emotion and engagement. Overall, this study shows that psychological incentives, rather than content enjoyment, alone drive continuous scrolling. While anticipation, curiosity, and social comparison sustain engagement, awareness of these processes may help us make more intentional decisions about social media use and reduce automatic scrolling behaviors. Thank you.
Do you think findings would be different if you could have given them access to the scrolling in like the more natural environments where we all pull out our phones because we're bored or waiting or whatever? Like, it seems to me like when we do the scrolling is also important in terms of the emotion that drives us to open the app, as well as like the effect of being in it. Does that make sense?
I think it does make sense. Probably approaching kids at school might make them think that they have better things to do. While when you're at home, you might just like focus on your scrolling. But it was kind of hard to like gather information if they would have done it by themselves or in a more natural setting.
You said one of your limitations was that you were using, their self-reporting qualitative feelings. Is there, if you had $1 million, or are there researchers who are doing quantitative data, and if so, what does that look like? Like, how do people study this?
For quantitative data, it might be more expensive because to gather actual data from a lot of people, it might come from a big survey, and that requires a lot of consent forms and things that I didn't have. So I think that qualitative data could have been better, and I wish I could have had more.
Have you seen an increase or a decrease on people comparing themselves to social media since it started?
I think I have. I think people are realizing that these standards are very fake and that a lot of people are sometimes seen outside of their daily like TikTok pages or Instagram pages, and they're just real people. We are just seeing what they want us to see, and a lot of people are gaining more consciousness on that, and I think that is very good. We're also gaining a lot of more real influencers, which show more of their day-to-day and not just like fancy events or festivals or things like that. So it's becoming a little more real, but there's certainly still a lot of people that compare themselves because we're still given a lot of things to compare ourselves to. Thank you.
Could you talk a little bit more about the design of the scrolling stream that you gave? Like, how did you choose how many images, that sort of thing?
Okay, so it took a long time to look for all the images. It was probably around 25, and I kind of measured it by time because a lot of people were just like, how long is it gonna take? So I had to make sure it was something that people were willing to do. So I couldn't make it that long, and the images were mostly like what I would personally compare myself to, which explains why it was so hard to make a male idealized feed, because I did not know what to put.
At any point in the research, did you ever consider looking into the social impact that this could have on these people? Like,
Could you repeat the question?
did you ever consider looking into like the impact on social lives of these people that this could have?
Oh, I did not. I think that's a little bit of a different route that I could have taken,
All
but
right,
I
yeah,
think it's
fair
still
enough.
very interesting.
How did other studies that have looked at the effect of social media select idealized feeds? Did you look at like other methods for doing that?
I did. I looked at a few research experiments done, and it was mostly people were always shown like Western ideals, and usually always girls, always females were shown, and then I could not find any of males. But yeah, it was usually girls or like celebrities or people like that, influencers. Thank you.